So, hello and welcome to the Roundtable for a member interview podcast series. I'm Kasheka. Joining us tonight is our good friend and valued member, Thorson, on the ecosystem of humanity. I wanted to talk to him about this earlier. It seems like such a fascinating topic, actually. But before we get started on all that, please make sure to follow us and join and subscribe to our BitChute, our YouTube live channels. Also, most of all, and join us in the Roundtable Discord server, where you'll find this and all of our well over 300 podcasts. They're under the hashtag RT podcast and hashtag podcast series channels. Now, with all that being said, welcome to everyone, live audience, and welcome to Thorson. Like I was saying, this is such a fascinating topic, actually. Can you explain what that means, the ecosystem of humanity?
So I think to put it in some basic terms, it's just how well a whole society and nation can work together as a team, and moreover, more the citizens and the participants in that society feel that things are moreover fair and or than when it's not. So either one of those, I mean, that's not even an extreme, that's not necessarily even a utopia. And we've had that, what I just described, many times in America, even though America also has a lot of dark, ugly past. And so the ecosystem of humanity is everything from how the government is constructed to the financial system to analyzing all of the behavioral science that happens inside of homes, to how we error correct inside of our psychology and our scientific fields as to what is healthy and why, for parenting, for what food is healthy for us, to all of these different things.
So you're saying that society in general is just disconnecting from what, each other?
Yeah, greatly amassed from one another. This is one of the things I'm constantly tracking. Is that moreover, especially inside of our interpersonal relationships, people are greatly disconnecting from one another, and explaining how and why that is happening takes quite a bit of time. There's many different factors that we're literally losing the ability to hear one another as idiocracy increases, and we have a devolution of our language, our ability to arrive at truth, to understand when we are right and when we are wrong, like caring for many different forms of biases, like egocentric bias, confirmation bias, as well as many others, as well as many logical fallacies. And so even one of the problems here is that the mass public isn't even educated on those, as well as I think there's many other things that I refer to as ego war mechanisms that we're not well identifying, we're not understanding that it is disallowing the other person in the conversation from being able to be heard. And I actually think that because of that, we are living inside of an oppression epidemic. And oppression doesn't just have to be a government oppressing its people, one race oppressing another. I think there's oppression that happens inside of the home when a person speaks and they're not heard, their concerns don't matter. They feel things aren't fair, even if their perceptions are incorrect and they're misinterpreting things. Resentment builds, and this is how we have all of these different like 60s, 70s, 80s TV shows and songs and movies with the protagonist, and the main story is how children are rebelling against their parents that are incredibly authoritarian, forcing them to live a certain way or not be able to iterate. And this gets into the complexity of conservatism versus progressivism, which isn't just a political thing. This is inside of each one of us. How do we conserve any of our ideas as to what we hold to be true, and when do we progress them? When do we know we need to do better on anything, on how to parent, on how to talk, on what a word means, on what a fact is, on what a study says, to a huge list of things that like idioms, like agree to disagree, or practice makes perfect. How do we know when these things are working really well for us and they're benefiting us, and when they need to be changed and iterated on in any way to make them better? I like to use the example of consent. It used to just be consent, and not just sexually, but in many different ways. Then informed consent. then I think then we need to have genuine informed consent that we can absolutely accurately measure, so we know when a person. So, and this is what I'm talking about, the evolution of ideas as we expand upon things. But too many people, due to these egoic mechanisms, these egotistical behaviors, like when a person is in power, think of like a 1950s dad, when they are setting the rules inside their household and they're like supremely in charge, and society overwhelmingly supports the man to be in charge in the household and make all the rules. Whenever he's right, it's really good. And we can go back there and we can see a lot of good. A lot of good ethics, a lot of good hard work, a lot of good values and principles instilled in the children. But wherever they're missing things and wherever they're wrong, and wherever their egotistical behaviors and this bad dark side of ego that we do not know how to well keep in check inside of our society and get rid of, it makes that person feel more important. Their time, their needs, their everything is more important. So even so even here, especially the wife is constantly being oppressed inside of the relationship when it's not a fair relationship. And then the person that's in charge can only see where they're right and where their things are good, and then they lack the motivation and ability to care where they're wrong and question them and themselves. But this isn't even on the average person or any one person we would ever pull up to look at. I believe this is actually very complex behavioral science that we understand some things about, but I think largely as a whole, even as the average person, to anyone in this room, we're going to all speak a portion of the truth of what those things are and how they work. But I think largely we're missing what these things, the the full scope of these things, and even what I want to do with not only this podcast but many future conversations, is continually question these things and have a second enlightenment, figure out what it is that we are all doing ever in conversations that is disallowing us from being able to hear the other person. One of the largest ones here, I call it the largest form of bigotry. As soon as we say, and it's the opposite of hate the sin, not the sinner. As soon as we say in our mind, I think this is what happens constantly inside of our society. As soon as we think inside of ourselves, I do not like this person, and that we have valid reasons why. They're saying bad things, they're doing bad things. Maybe this person is even doing really horrible, heinous things in society. But as soon as we say that, I don't like this person. And unless I say it's even some heinous thing, but it's a Republican and a Democrat, and they don't like each other. Just because they don't like each other, they're already just, so bigotry, at least the definition used to be showing showing intolerance towards another person based on their views. I think when a person is speaking, so when the Democrat speaks or the Republican speaks, if the other has less motivation to engage in the claims of the other, less integrity, so a Democrat will engage in claims of another Democrat with more integrity, with more effort, with more value. I think this is one of the largest forms of bigotry we are not identifying well enough. We kind of are sometimes here or there, but we're not seeing how gross it is when as soon as we say, so instead of having agape love and loving everyone and hating the sin and the bad behavior or the bad view and not the person, loving the person, because it isn't just our ability to be able to engage in the claims, especially when they say things we believe to be absurd. That's when you get somebody scoffing and then mocking the idea of whatever it is that they believe to be absurd. But as soon as we say that we don't like the other person, we also display less effort to show where they're right in their arguments, and we also display less effort to say they did good behavior there. They did a really good thing there. Oh, that was a really good job. And we're not seeing this. And this is not just Republican versus Democrat. This is men versus women. This is white versus black. This is anywhere we have any of these dividing lines anywhere today that are either imaginary or misinterpreted or are actually there. This is, I think this goes in the subcategory of an othering mechanism, that we have ourselves in our own group, and then there's the other. And we criticize, so there's this like tainting mechanism of the other side. We exaggerate their bad behaviors. Think of CNN every time they cover Donald Trump. They would downplay his good and exaggerate his bad. And then vice versa. Donald Trump would mock any idea they had, and the thing is both sides are constantly making good points. They really are. No one is just saying something, and this is a really hard claim to even, I mean, it's an absolute statement, so it's difficult, but no one's just saying just bullshit that has no basis in anywhere. As we all speak, this is what I truly believe, we are giving a portion of the truth. We are missing things, or we're wrong all at the same time. But there's this thing in society that whoever's right more often, we love to put in charge. And there's a good thing there. When we're right, we know how things work. We reduce the amount of pain. When we're right about immunology or whatever it is, vaccines, or how to educate our immune system, of having a better diverse microbiome, whatever it is, whatever the information that where it's coming from, of our authority figures, of our parents, our teachers, our CEOs, our bosses, our managers, all of these different areas of life where decisions are being controlled, wherever these people are right, it is really good. But when we lack the ability to know how to care where we're wrong, and we're literally not able to engage in the claims of the people we think that are the other, and we're not seeing that we are downplaying their arguments, we do not know all this full list. Most people don't know the full list of logical fallacies, but I definitely can't recite. I know, and I see, the black and white fallacy and straw manning and others like that quite often. How many times I've done that in my life is incredible to me. I was born and raised one of these credulent masses that didn't, the constantly thinking that we truly understand how to critically think. That's what I thought for most of my life. But it's like very simplistic level one logical reasoning of understanding a topic just a little bit, and basically just regurgitating what our authority figures have told us wherever we got the information from, and not really understanding the topic well, but having a great deal of arrogance in our stance of, no, this is the right thing, this is what my authority figure that I trust is. And this sheds a light on this gross level of lack of self-criticism we're seeing everywhere in our society, not just inside of how we support our leaders, but think of like a woman or a man, after they break up, they go to their family members or their friends. I think that what they're doing there is they're error correcting. We're constantly error correcting, trying to figure out what happened. But most of the time, that at least what I've seen, especially as of late inside of reality TV shows and other places, when a woman goes to her friends, she does not get any amount of, okay, yeah, he did some things wrong, we need to hear that. And yeah, he was wrong there. And then where she's wrong. There's no about where she needs to change. She's perfect, and only the other person is wrong. This breeds narcissism, as we lack the ability to criticize ourselves and each other.
Is that
Sorry,
why you've chosen
Kachika.
to? Is that why you've chosen to show us the fairness doctrine? Why have you chosen to show us this?
Yeah. So I think this is a large part of this. So I believe, to some good extent, we can see, and I'd like to use many different forms of data, but like, let's use this one right here. This right here is a stunning visualization of our divided Congress. What I believe, so this is a study that where they show, like, every 2 years, we can see people in the middle, Republicans and Democrats. We can see what I think are gradient overlaps of, like, because this is their like how they're voting on policies and making compromise and being able to vote on bills and make things and push things forward and happen for the American people, of all the all the different problems that they're trying to solve, when this system is working well. And I don't think this is healthy, by the way. I don't think 1949 is healthy, but there's some level of health here. It's probably around the 40th percentile, but it should be better than this. Look what happens when we get to 1989. We just start splitting. You can't have, imagine a husband and a wife on every single topic they were ever discussing pulling apart like this. I think this is what's happening in most places. And so what happened was, so the Fairness Doctrine was introduced in 1949, was a policy that requires holders of broadcast licenses to both represent controversial issues of public importance, and to do so in a manner that was honest, equitable, and balanced. So when there is a controversial topic of, like, financial reform or whatever it is, during all these different times that we've had issues inside of our country, and we're having this public town square conversation wherever we're having it. Most people are listening to radio or news around this time, on television and news radio and newspapers and magazines. But what happened was, when they removed the Fairness Doctrine, journalist integrity got to get bought out and become corrupted, to where, imagine if anyone in this room is deep, intimate, connected with relationship with the other, and then they and their families and friends, when there's this blame game war fight, you guys are against each other, they get to downplay how good you are, downplay your arguments you're presenting as to when you're trying to identify her bad behavior and vice versa, or and where she's right and where you're right and your good behavior. But it's not fair. The conversation isn't fair. It is now changed and tainted to where the representing the other person's arguments do not need to be well thought out and showing the representations of the other person's of the other side. So when they were showing Republican or Democrat, the different news organizations got to get bought out, and over time the standards for us to uphold how to arrive at truth, engage in each other's claims, know how to argue, this epistemology, logical manners in which we do these things, we lost. Not only did we lose the ability to iterate and make those things better, because I don't think that they're perfect, but I think there's a fuck ton of good there, absolutely. But those standards got to get lost, and I think what happened is that over the last 30 years, the American people, the average person, is seeing on the place where they're getting their news radio, the issues they care about, or in TV, and obviously now social media and YouTube and stuff like that. They're hearing Ivy League educated individuals that went to school for communications and political science, and they're learning how to argue to win the argument. One of the examples I like to use is like this the Daily Show with Trevor Noah. They have this one where panel shows are a shit show. They show like a political debate like back in 1949. The guys are like just very mild mannered, just going back and forth, and the person presented the argument or the video is even going, hey, wait the fuck up, I know you just fell asleep. And then they show to today where the moderator usually can't even get a words in edgewise because the people are screaming at one another. So over time, our devolution of the English language to understand concepts and how things work just continually got worse and worse and worse as both sides are not seeing this huge list of bad behaviors. And I think the largest form of bigotry is one of the biggest ones, disliking the other person, the other side, to not push forth the amount of effort that needs to be there to ensure that if there is any validity in their claims, it needs to be sought out. We should want to know that. Anyone should want to know that. Anyone's ever presenting any argument of any idea or any philosophy that we can learn from, even if it's just a small valid point, we need to know it, and as soon as possible, and everyone does. So we're not giving something to, oh, I'll give you that one. That's because we're inside of a war that we're fighting back and forth from left to right, just not knowing how to conserve our ideas and progress them.
So what do you see the long-term effects or issues of humanity disconnecting from one another? Like what kind of a world would we be potentially living in if we don't correct this?
Well, I think we're already in the early stages of a dystopian nightmare, and I hate to be so alarmist, but I think the writing's on the fucking wall. We just have to look at the many different statistics of mental illness greatly increasing, homelessness crisis just becoming a fucking insane joke at this point. Like, what the fuck is going on there? Suicide rates increasing, especially in teen boys. Our dating scene is a fucking nightmare right now. Just go on TikTok and just listen to how people are talking about dating. It is a fucking shit show. It is so bad. We are already devolving in a great manner as society. We're already having an infertility, like the list of bad behavior, the things that are like catastrophic. We're having an infertility problem. So about 10 or 20 years, we're going to have a significant problem with birthing babies altogether. A huge list of other nature problems of like, the plastics that are in our food and how much that's mimicking estrogen and causing hormone imbalance there. There's a sleep crisis we're dealing with that Matthew Walker is tracking. He's been on Joe Rogan a couple of times, as well as Andrew Huberman's podcast. Talking about it's just every year it's decreasing. And even this goes even to the ego war mechanisms of this arrogance that when we look at something of how we operate, no, I only need 4 hours of sleep, I'm totally fine. And what if they're really wrong, so insanely wrong that their ability to even cope that day and control their emotions and not snap at their kids, and they're like, that's just getting worse every day and they're not seeing it because they're not getting legitimately enough quality and quantity of sleep and knowing how to measure that as our ability. So one of the main points, and there's so many main points here, but our ability to error correct is just going down inside of a society, but also the average person. It's just plummeting. It's just decreasing every day. Like another one of the points is Andrew Huberman talks about in order for adults to be able to enact neuroplasticity, and if I'm wrong on my interpretation of how this mechanism works, I want to understand. But this is what I see right now. That in order for us to learn anything, so if anyone in here is going to learn something, and from anyone ever speaking, if we're going to learn anything from, and you hold on to that, then neuroplasticity to some level of efficiency had to work. And he talks about the neurotransmitters like a dopamine, acetylcholine, epinephrine that we have to enact to be motivated to learn. We can't just passively learn. You won't stick. Neuroplasticity won't take hold. And so I think this even goes to the error rates we have every day. If we're not knowing how to enact change to where we can commit to understanding something and go, yeah, now I know the better thing I need to do. Like I'm fucking up. I'm making this mistake and I need to stop doing that. I'm doing this to this person or myself. If we don't even know how to do that, and neuroplasticity is at such a gross bad level, because one of the problems is that we were at 60% chronic disease rates, as well as many other factors. We're becoming weaker as a species day by day.
So all
So
in all, does it
even people
basically?
that want to error correct can't do it because that process isn't happening to the level of efficiency to where they can actually remember and it takes hold.
So basically, it's up to the individual to take responsibility for theirself. There's themselves, from, like you were saying, the sleep, the amount of sleep a person gets, the type of stresses that are in their lives, the attention that they're paying on whatever it is that they're doing. What other
I do think we need personal responsibility, but I believe this is a societal, systemic problem that we need to fix our public square, town square conversation. So when we have conversations like this, or any of them, we talk about dating or politics or whatever, that place where we have those conversations, it doesn't need to be perfect. There's definitely room for error. We're
She's
all going to
kind of
make
on point
mistakes.
though, bro. Like what she says, it's a innate thing within yourself which is causing these issues. When you keep arguing against that, you kind of sound like one of those incels that go kill people.
No, I don't think that that's what he's trying to say. He's trying to point out that he's doing it very passionately too, because of the fact that he's very concerned with this, right? So why is it that you think, Thorson, that why do you think this is the elephant in the room, that people just generally don't talk about this? Why is that?
I think people are constantly talking about it. I will listen to almost anywhere. People are identifying many of these things. We're just not coming together completely to say, okay, let's figure this out. We need to solve for this. We need to say, okay, what's going on there? Okay, why is that person not hearing that person? Why are they disconnecting from, siblings are hitting each other, and parent-child relationships are just tearing apart? I mean, how many people I've heard that like the children hate the parents because the parents support Trump? It is nightmarish. Like we're really disconnecting, and it isn't just about politics. This is about anywhere disagreement arises. We are terrible at going through it. We're even having toxic positivity problems where idioms like agree to disagree is making a good point, and we need to be able to have the good point it is making in our idioms that we're operating on, this code of how to, like, what the good is good and bad behavior to whatever the situation is. So but if everyone every single time, as soon as disagreement arises, said let's just agree to disagree, how the fuck does anyone ever learn they're wrong? We'll never do it. I think it's mathematically, legitimately impossible, and we will instead we'll agree to disagree until we have our throats around, our hands around each other's throats,
Is that
because
what
we
you were
won't.
talking about with ego war mechanisms? Is that what you mean by that?
Right. Yes. Some of them, like one of the biggest ones is the othering mechanism, and the largest form of bigotry of not liking somebody because of their bad behaviors. Another one is mockery. Mockery is not just joking. Sorry, my girl is playing a game. I try to ask her to be quiet, but mockery is very specifically contemptuous joking. I think it is insanely unhealthy, and no one ever in a healthy society should be having contempt for another person and mocking them. I think that is insanely terrible. And also, for jokes to be healthy, there has to be mutual respect. Some healthy level of mutual respect between the siblings, the friends, the two groups for the joke to be funny. If there is this resentment and it is just mockery, and then we're putting it under the guise of like, oh, it's just a joke. You should be able to just take a joke, man. We're just doing the thing where we're belittling the other side, calling it just a joke, actually having hatred and resentment and contempt for the other side, and we're not identifying that. Steven Crowder does this all the time. Just look at any SJW Pwn videos or some of the newer ones, or any of these Karen videos that people are putting out. It's insane. Like we're devolving a society where we just want to hate the person. We see a Karen in society displaying bad behavior, and they are. But so are the other people in that situation. And immediately we draw a line, a binary line. Which side are you on? You're supposed to fucking hate the Karen. And if you criticize the person taking the video, or the person describing the video and going, haha, look at how bad this fucking Karen is, you're on the wrong side. You're on the side of the Karen.
That's the oppression epidemic that you were talking about, right?
Right. We're constantly we're picking sides and oppressing the other for what we believe are really good motives. This person's doing a bad thing, ha ha ha. But I really believe, like many of these things, shame, mockery, they're terrible. They're toxic. These are like these highly fear-based consequences to get somebody to change their behavior. We need the love-based methods of getting somebody to change their behavior. That starts first and foremost with respecting their autonomy. Please go ahead.
Their autonomy, as in respecting or taking responsibility for themselves, or respecting themselves. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, respecting their autonomy, respecting them as an individual, and not wanting to feel like we have to either have horrible, like crazy laws in place, like vaccine mandates or whatever it is, to make the other person do their behavior. We have figured out very well how to make sure that if somebody's wrong about something, and we can prove it to some good measure, and there's some things we definitely can't prove. There's still a lot of mysteries inside the microbiome, the brain. There's a lot of things we can say, I don't know. We don't know enough yet. But there are many different things I think we can start proving, or at least to some degree, and we can learn how we move forward, and we can make things more fair more often. This is one of the core tenets. What I think the American Constitution, the Enlightenment period, was constantly going for the least amount of pain possible to make things as fair as possible. I don't think anyone in this room, and I don't know all of you guys, but I'm just saying, I don't believe we could write the American Constitution. I think we can in the future if we work at it. But these people wrote this incredible document that is so well worded, that has all of these checks and balances, and it wasn't perfect. It became corrupted still. It's where we're at now. But it also brought the largest prosperity any country has ever seen, because of the continual fairness for the average person, and being able to file complaints against your own government, and these checks and balances of like what laws are in place to protect the average person, instead of allowing a tyrannical authoritarian government to be able to rule its people and never be scrutinized. This is one of the problems that we haven't solved yet inside of our society. Whoever's in control of decisions, if they have a wall of lack of scrutiny, you can't criticize them. There's a fucking problem. There's going to always be oppression. So whether it's inside of a household or it's at the government level, it's always going to be oppression. Obviously, how big the decision is and how big the oppression is going to be a larger problem. But it is still oppression, and it still causes resentment that leads to revolutions, rebellions, and all these other things that we can move past when we finally figure out how to move past what I call the dominant submissive dichotomy. Like in the 1800s, men were just completely in charge instead of the household in all areas of life, to where even a man could say, my wife is displaying irrational and hysterical behavior, and have her legitimately committed to a mental asylum for a very long time. That kind of power.
Okay, so basically that was the respecting the autonomy of the other that you're referring to. So okay, so I understand that better now. You just made a point about moving past the dominant submissive dichotomy. Can you go like elaborate on that a little bit more?
Right. So this is something I call flip the script. We didn't move past the dominant submissive dichotomy, where instead of a relationship in the household that America supports, our society supports that person to be in charge. How many idioms there in like the 1950s of like wife beater shirts or I'm sorry, that's not an idiom, but like keep your woman in line, or backhanding a woman, or anything like that. As a woman, she's supposed to keep her mouth shut. She's not allowed to criticize, and the women oppression. So we went from men being supported to be in charge to women to be supported to be in charge. This is fourth wave feminism. Women are queens. They're supposed to be worshipped. And I'm painting more as some of the extremes, but these are actual cases and videos we can see on TikTok and YouTube of women saying these things. This is why we're seeing so much rhetoric about women hating women. So there's this fight and this struggle of who's in control, who's in charge, who gets to make the decisions, instead of knowing very well how to make those decisions together based on genuine agreement, cooperation, compromise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we haven't figured out we did figure that how to do that in America to some degree. But once the fairness doctrine was broken, and our devolution of how our public square and how the conversation people were engaging in more and more often became more and more toxic as we became less and less able to hear one another, we didn't move past it. We just shifted who gets to be in charge of the relationship.
So
And
how
this
can we
isn't
hear each
just
other
husband
better?
and wife. What's
How
that?
can we hear each other better as a society, as individuals, family, community, company, country? What's the antidote? Like, how can we hear each other better?
One, I think we need to see that we actually can change that. However, people, because one of the arguments, I've been on this path for about 6 years now, and I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people. And one of the main arguments I get is people won't change, and they have a lot of valid points and evidence to show that people don't change. But they all stop talking and not being able to actually give any good counter argument once I show them Daryl Davis. So this is a man who went to somebody that thought to people that thought based on the color of his skin, they were incredibly superior to him. To where even I mean, this is only about 4 or 5 years ago he did this. So this is in modern era times. People are card carrying KKK members, which is a very small percentage of people in our society that are actually that. He went to those people and he converted over 200 people that were already willfully ignorant, that already hated him, thought he was beneath them. And there is so much we can learn from what he did there and engaging in their light. He talks about on the Joe Rogan podcast that they're some of the hardest workers he's ever seen in their life. And he also didn't browbeat them about going, you're racist, stop being racist. This is really bad. Can't you see it's bad? He used logic. He talks about the different arguments he would have with them about actually, he would use logic and reasoning and love to make them change their mind. And 200 people of a life, like even some of these people, like the highest. One second, I'm just going to ask my daughter to. So that's one example. So the antidote to this overarching is, I think we need a fairness doctrine for humanity that would encompass things like a framework for healthy conversations that would have how we arrive. That has all these different things from epistemology to how we iterate our idioms to any of the problems we see anywhere. These documents would be self-correcting, just like they had in the American Constitution, where they didn't write the Constitution and go, "This is exactly how you fucking do this thing. Do not ever change a goddamn word." They gave us so many different ways to change the amendments, the main things that they put in place to make our governing happen and occur, from freedom of religion and press and the right to bear arms, et cetera, et cetera. They, as well as create new policies and laws, as we see fit. So we would have some measure of that, this living document that we can continually, as we see and improve our understandings of how we do this well together or we don't. We are a team, and we're working in concert, in harmony, with the least amount of suffering as possible. Or we're not. But and then we have a framework for change, which would have the nature and nurture how people change, from neuroplasticity to how we change our minds. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was thinking about how I did bring up the issue of an individual having to take on responsibility for themselves, how they interact with others, how they
Yes.
respond to others. And a member of the audience was brought up the good point where, yeah, that is a valid start. A person does need to do that. And then I thought about the whole the actual fact that he was presenting a potentially opposing viewpoint, right? And I let him know that my belief was this. Um, in that situation, should it have been where we obviously did listen to his viewpoint on it. He was saying that it sounded as if, you were, I don't know, some kind of incel thing or whatever. I don't know, passionate on, I don't know what it was really. Is that listener, is that, I'm going to open it up to audience questions after this, but the person that asked that question, are you still here?
Yeah, he's there.
Can
He's
you
Hellboy.
elaborate on what you thought when you were making your point or your statement? I'm trying to practice a little bit of what has been discussed here, right? Trying to listen to the
Thank you.
viewpoint of
The
the other.
question is for you, Hellboy. If you want to elaborate on your previous question, you have a chance now to speak. Hellboy. Going once, going twice. Okay, never mind.
Cool. But
Well,
is that a good example of what you were saying that we need to do as a society to better listen to each other, right? To give each other that say.
right, but everything's contextual, and then we have to have many different parameters here of like necessity and things like that. So, for instance, in this specific conversation, this is a podcast,
Mhm.
and it was not appropriate for him to even speak at that moment, no matter how frustrated he was. He can write it and save the question for later. But imagine if everyone was operating on he thought he could do that. And if everyone does that, as soon as they're upset with anything that I said or anyone inside of a podcast is saying, the room turns into chaos as we're all talking over one another. So rules are very important. And equally
Agreed.
as important is the ability to question those rules, that no one is above criticism. Not Donald Trump, not the FCC, not Dr. Fauci, not, we need to solve this problem that wherever there are rules, whoever controls what those rules are is an empathetic leader in the manner of understanding really well how to conduct self-constructive criticism, to be able to engage in other people's arguments that they care as soon as possible if they are wrong and they are causing harm and they're not seeing it. And a rule needs to be changed.
So basically, to have the fairness doctrine in place, right? The fairness act. What do you have up right now? Symptoms, nature, nurture.
This is me. Like yesterday, I streamed on Twitch and I was writing a bunch of stuff. And I was trying to just write an outline, but it's so hard with this topic. There's so much to go through. I can
Yeah.
legitimately talk about this topic for the next 6 hours, and there's still more things to get to. Or we're dealing with how free will works, idioms like "oh, you're making excuses" and how damaging it is, as well as it's making a good point. There's just a huge list of the complexity of who we are, the complex systems that are inside of each one of us, to our our brains, our cognitive abilities, to our microbiome, our immune system, how we affect one another due to all of those different things. I believe we are, I don't know necessarily a hive mind, but we are definitely a collective, and we greatly affect one another. And we're hurting right now, like in a significant way.
Hurting is in because of the fact that you were talking about how, and I've witnessed this myself, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people have, the disconnection from each other, from life, from reality in most cases, in many cases, right?
Yeah,
That
the high
does.
rates. I mean, we just started tracking the variables like how much ghosting is occurring today. But
Yeah,
sorry,
that's
I'm sorry. You
damaging.
finish your
No, it's
question.
very
I apologize.
damaging. It's exactly what you were saying. I was just, I for
But
myself
it,
tried to
yeah.
figure out how a person or how a group or society can correct this. Aside from, I don't know, I know the roundtable has really good rules on allowing each person to have their say. You know, the 2-minute rule, having where each person can say their piece, basically, right, and then another
Mhm.
person can speak afterwards. Um, I believe that that does take individual responsibility. I have to be responsible for myself to, number one, follow those rules, right? Number two,
Mhm.
allow myself to hear, to actually listen to the other person. So, what kinds of steps, like basic steps, can you suggest that an individual take if they notice within themselves that, number one, this is something that's happening and they're concerned about it and they want to make a change for it?
Control your own code. Figure out how you can ensure that you can criticize everyone, and not because you're trying to be contrary, not because you're trying to be self-deprecating and you're just trying to horribly criticize yourself. This is a difficult balance to do. But too many people just prop up somebody. You know, like Jordan Peterson fans can never criticize Jordan Peterson. Nietzsche fans can never criticize Nietzsche. Donald Trump fans can rarely criticize Donald Trump in any way. This is terrible. We have to fix this. So controlling your own code means you criticize everybody. You appreciate their light where they're right. So the light, I call this the four quadrants. So there's the wide range of good behaviors, wide range of good views, wide range of bad behaviors, bad views. So the left side is the light and the right side is the dark, and of course there's the gray in between, because there's a huge range. We don't all just have incredible, like, life curing ideas constantly, and our views are just so amazing and stupendous. There's just a complicated range of how we even evaluate these things, but too often they're not even trying to be evaluated in an accurate way with integrity. And so controlling your own code is talking about fixing that process and ensuring that we're never operating on, no, I just know how all that works. I'm a smart person. I'm a good person. I know how to engage in a claim. And we only see the good performative abilities we have in doing that practice. I actually legitimately think listening is a complex ability to do. Imagine if the simplistic logical reasoning we give people and tell people to do is just listen and listen with intent. But when you're not caring for so many different logical fallacies, biases, othering mechanisms, what happens when that person hears an absurd idea and they're not actually listening? A really good one that it's just TED Talk that shows this really well. We're not going to watch it right now, but I'm just going to pull it up really quick.
Would you be able to put those links in the podcast
Yeah,
channel? Perfect.
she talks about this in this TED Talk.
Okay, perfect. That would be
Um,
great to watch after.
which general chat or which?
Podcast text chat, the channel, the podcast text channel. I do have a question in there
Oh,
from
there
Drew.
it is. Okay.
Yeah. Drew's asking a question. I don't know if Drew wants to ask that question himself. Drew, are you available to ask that question yourself?
Oh yeah, I just didn't want to interrupt. So I was just going to ask, like, what kind of team it would require to build up the standard you're like going towards, and also, what kind of social experiments would be involved that you have on mind.
Yeah, social experiments is really fun. There's so many. Like having webcams. People would just start volunteering to have cameras in their rooms. So all the conversations, they're analyzing themselves and their own conversations, not to come from the ego war side of the blame game war and just tear people apart and use other people's bad behavior against them to manipulate and control them. In fact, that's one of the reasons that the people's ability to hear criticism is so low, is because it's constantly used to control them. So when they hear criticism, they fear they're not going to get what they want, and this is a self-error correcting thing they're doing, seeing this pattern of behavior that as soon as they hear criticism, they don't get what they want in that relationship, and they're being gaslighted and talked down to and manipulated and controlled. But so not from the ego war side of all these toxic behaviors, whatever we'd call the world that we're trying to create, whether it's utopia or Narnia or heaven on earth. I'll just call it Narnia for right now. Inside of that world, when we have these webcams inside the household and the conversations happen, we get to go back and, like, especially, there's different moments in conversations. We're like, you said it like this and you said this, and the person's like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. We have the proof and we can go through it. And again, it is not to tear them down. I truly believe good form criticism and good form appreciation of a person's light and dark is how we love each other.
Right. I get what you're saying, bro, but there's also a part of me that thinks that, as when we're kids, right, we develop an ego as children. And then, as children, we also create this ideal world, which is what we want to be as adults, right? And, we may not realize this as children, but we do that. And, it's part of the ego that's created, which creates our ideal world that we want to be as children. And I think that follows us for the rest of our lives. And, if you're not that persona that your childhood person wanted to be, then you're going to be depressed.
That's a really good point. There's expectations that people have that are can never be met. Disney movies promote this a lot, like this perfect, love romance of how even people meet, and romantic comedies do this as well. That you need it, like it has to happen this way, and it's so serendipitous, and the people expect that to happen, and it's not reality of how most
I
people
would,
meet.
I do not like it when people start, blaming shit on Disney, and I do understand where you're getting from, which is it does have an enormous impact on a child's upbringing. But I actually think that, when a child's ego and it is created, I think it's really not about television. I think it's more about, positive reinforcements the parents can give or negative reinforcements the parent can give.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all about it. It really is about the fucking parents.
Yes, I agree. So much of the ideology and idioms that a person operates on comes from the parents. There's definitely nuance here. We're painting a broad brush, but the vast majority, especially over the last 200 years in America, I agree with you. It's in the household. This is where they learn what's expected of them, and what is right and wrong.
And I mean, it's kind of why, like, a king would have the mentality as a kid to be a king, right? And I started thinking about this shit a while ago, right? And I was like, there was a particular statement in the Bhagavad Gita which I didn't like. What Krishna said was, you should not try to strive for shit outside of your own being. Like, if basically what he was trying to say is, like, if you as a cunt who is gonna cut grass your whole life, then just cut grass and be happy doing that, as opposed to trying to be the other motherfucker who's running a company, right? I didn't like that, but it took me a while to understand why Krishna said that. And I think it kind of makes sense, because it's just about just being happy with what the fuck you is as a
Well, this
person.
is one of the ways. Go ahead. If I may. So this is one of the things that how we affect one another, like I talked before, like how much we affect one another. So what is valued in our society is what people want to go after. especially when they're trying to get a mate. And we have these biological motivators in us that of driving to not only reproduce and have a species, but also like how we build our community as humanity for error correcting. I think so much of this goes to what I call the desire to know and error correcting. But instead of our society is whatever we value and we're valuing incorrect things today, but we can't have a national public conversation about that because our ability to have public conversations is obviously it's broken. It's terrible.
Can you
We can't do
explain
it.
the error correcting that you were mentioning? What does that mean to you? Error correcting.
So problem solving, error correcting. This is, I think, constantly happening everywhere. Think of like a doctor in like the 1800s that and his wife is sick from an illness and he takes cholera to try and error correct for it. That desire to know, I think. This goes to the logic versus emotion argument. I have a wild idea that all logic is based on emotion. Yeah, even learning complex math or the simplest math or any form of math, I think, is only because it can benefit us. It can do something for us. It's useful. It's a tool. It helps us understand the world around us and appreciate it more, which is still an emotion motivator to what we can do with it, how we can solve problems of immunology and developing vaccines and antibiotics to Samuel Ignoise when he figured out that there are microbes and solved the infant mortality crisis and drastically reduced it after doctors finally learned that of this thing and that they just need to wash their hands before fully in a specific manner before when they go from the autopsy room to the delivery room. That this desire to know, to push out. I mean, he had to go like, how do we even put ourselves in the minds of people at that time in the 1700s when he did that, that had no idea microbes existed? What's an absurd claim for us? Like there's an alien race on Pluto that's controlling all of our minds. That's not something I believe at all. I'm just like, what's the insane, absurd thing? We all know microbes exist to some extent and are educated in some way, but they weren't at all. They were hearing an incredibly absurd idea. What kind of mysticism did he have to go into of even trying to question and try and understand this? And how many scientists have done that over, and philosophers and intellectuals have constantly done that, gone into this incredible, dark, murky chaos, mysticism of not having logical formulations, but then pulling those out of there to construct things that benefit us.
So do you think that that's something that's missing from the majority of societies, like a curiosity of the outside world and others that's stopping them? Maybe because of, stressors in life or whatever that's causing a person to want to more go inward and protect from the outside world. Do you think that that's an aspect to that?
Well, the curiosity thing is really interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because anti-intellectualism oppresses curiosity. Just look, go watch the TV show Freaks and Geeks or any high school show where people are constantly, anytime good points are being made up or questions are being asked of a person's behavior or how something works or math or school or test is constantly being downplayed. So curiosity, you get mocked for being a nerd. So again, contemptuous joking of this like social suicide thing that happens when we step out our line or we risk being ostracized is also a problem that we see not only in a high school, but everywhere else in life. That if people say the wrong thing or wrong think today in too many different places, there'll be cancel culture, they'll be fired, they'll lose their friends, their family members. They'll be ostracized from society and this goes to the ego war mechanism of blasphemy, like Catholicism versus science. That no, you just need to fall in line and just believe everything that we're telling you, and there's a wall of lack of scrutiny, and anything you say or question, like it can't be true. It's absurd. Any dissenting opinion is the adversary. Catholicism developed a whole anthropomorphized. I can't say that word very well. The adversary, which is if you and me, Kashika, are ever in a conversation and we're debating something, you are my adversary and I am yours. You have ideas where I think you're wrong. You have ideas where I think and vice versa. And then we also have areas where we agree. But where we disagree, we are each other's adversary. They took adversary and they turned it into Satan. So easily, as soon as any diverging opinion ever comes up, they get to squash that, which is another complex thing that I call an argument avoidance device. And there's a huge list of these things. It's everything from calling a person a conspiracy theorist to not engage in any of their claims, to, oh, like that person said, I'm an incel, like, or and people, that's the othering mechanism. Oh, because you're an incel, therefore you have all these ideas. I know how to argue with you already. I know what your ideas are. I don't need to even listen to them. That is even goes again to the largest form of bigotry, where we don't get to fully hear what the person says. Maybe they'll see something new.
That just made me think of healthy sportsmanship. I used to play a game, like be on teams when I was younger, and if it was a good game against our opponent, it was a good game, and then you thank them
Right.
for a fantastic game, right?
Right.
And that sense of good sportsmanship, as they call it, really is, I think, a part of what you're talking about, where the lack of that um, brings about those feelings of separation and like the hatred or
Yeah.
the not wanting to have anything to do with their opponent, right? Whereas that
Yeah.
opponent is something to challenge them.
Yeah, the ego mechanisms ruin everything. They ruin competition. They ruin comparing. They ruin complaining. They ruin judging, because they to the level of degree of that person has these ego or mechanisms in them. They have hatred, and they display this dark side of alpha energy, the ego. They're more important. They talk down to the other person. They belittle them. Especially when competing, and they're not seeing that they're competing with themselves first and foremost, always, not just inside of sports. But also when we're competing ideas, when we're competing for jobs, we're competing with ourselves first, and the other person being better than we are is helping us be better than we are. And this is a joint symbiotic relationship by which we help each other. The better I am, I help you be better than you are today. And we do that playing StarCraft 2 or Overwatch, to tennis sports, to any performative area of life. I think this is a beautiful and wonderful thing that is constantly being tainted by these terrible, hedonistic, egotistical behaviors. And it muddies the waters, and then people are blaming competition as the problem. They're blaming complaining as this is another problem with all of this. We're misidentifying the problem constantly. We're not getting to the root causes. There's actually, this is another one of the points, I'll finish with this and we'll take some more questions. There's a TED Talk that has like 31 million views. It's one of the largest TED Talks I've ever seen. It talks about this. He brings forth the worst form of complaining, the worst form of judging, and he calls them, he describes them as being part of the 7 deadly sins that no one should ever be doing. I think there are absolutely bad form complaining. There's bad form judgment, and it needs to stop. There's bad form criticism. And this is with the motivation and ability by which a person gets to do this performative process, these processes. But how do we do anything if you do really good at your soccer game and I watch the whole thing and I go through 20 minutes of conversation with you and you see the different times I said you did good and how you did it and why? That requires assessing and judgment and criticism all at the same time. There's no way that's possible without that.
Agreed.
So we're literally the tools that we need to survive, to thrive and excel and be harmoniously with one another as a team everywhere in life and helping each other. The tools we need of complaining, the tools which is just identifying issues. People overinflate it with whining, but that is a bad form of complaining. And judgment and a huge list of things. I know intelligent people think arguing is always bad, or think there's no bad behavior. Like we're getting a lot wrong, and we can come together, create a second enlightenment, and start writing all of this stuff down, figuring out what's happening there. No one's ego's in the way. Mine isn't. I am trying to continually ensure it's in check, and everyone can constantly criticize it. In fact, I desire that of people that I respect their opinion, because there's definitely people that are still stuck in the ego war problems, and that's the thing that's hard to process. It goes to the whole thing of this constant isolationist mentalities that are promoted in our society, like don't care what other people think. I think that there's a good point that's being made there, and I think I understand why people are very well why people are adopting this ideology of don't not care what other people think. But that sentence needs to be longer, and there's a second sentence that goes with it. Do not care what other people think that have bad form assessment and judgment, that are giving bad form criticism. Because there's usually always a good point. Think of like a person yelling at a fat girl for being fat and going, ha ha ha, look how fucking fat you are. You lazy. Yeah, there's still a good point. There's a problem with them being overweight. And I actually think we can get into all of that. It's just a symptom of your body telling you there's a problem that needs to be identified and addressed that actually is negatively impacting the person's health. But that's obviously bad form criticism. But this, and then the second sentence that goes with that is care what people think of opinions you respect. This is essential in life. We cannot be seen inside of our own lives if we are not being seen by people we respect inside of our interpersonal relationships. The more they see us, and the more we're able to establish that trust bond of respecting their opinion, that we would agree with everything that they say. But we believe that their feedback is genuine. There isn't passive aggressiveness or any of these things where they're trying to tear us down or manipulate us in any way. That when they're giving us a feedback of where we're right or where we're wrong, or where we're good or where we're bad, we care what they think. I think this is also very essential. And this idiom of don't care whatever people think is another damaging one. That's a toxic positivity thing that's promoted just constantly on TikTok and everywhere else as a self-promotion thing. Or yeah.
The bad form criticism, the closing off to others. Do you think that this is an indication of a population with unhealed, like the majority of the population with unhealed uh, psychological or emotional wounds?
Yeah, definitely. Growing up inside the household, like Hellboy was talking about, these things are learned there where there's constant oppression things happening every day as the kids are displaying many different bad behaviors. And I think this is also where mental illness happens as well. But they're developing these things of trying to learn what behavior gets them the thing. But when discipline and standards are waning inside of our society as a whole, I think we can constantly see them inside the household as well. I'm constantly seeing this in so many different places. I just so one of the things I do is I have a Discord server called the SOUL, Science of Universal Love, and I have a section called data collection. So when I find videos like TikToks and other things like that, different categories, I put them in there. I just did 3 of those this morning where these single moms were complaining about how they can't handle their kids, and I'm just seeing insane lacks of discipline of when the kids are displaying bad behavior, it's not being called out until it gets to this high level, and then the mom snaps at them. And it just becomes like this really terrible problem. Like we're just not getting so much of how to parent and all these things right. So a lot of trauma is actually caused in the household as kids are being raised, that is making it to where when they can become adults, they have all this trauma inside of them, not knowing how to resolve conflict in relationships. And then those people are trying to have boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife relationships.
Thorson, take a second and send me the invite link to your server that you mentioned, assuming that it's open to the public, and then I'll post it in the chat so anybody who is listening can also join.
Thank you.
I'm going to need Drew's help to help make that open and stuff like that. I'm very new to it, so it'll be like 20 minutes after the podcast.
Sure.
Just go ahead and re-invite me, and I got you, bud. I'll help.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just send it to me now, anybody who's listened, I'm sure everybody's enjoyed this as much as I have. Excellent content, excellent presentation. So if you want to talk to Thorson more, see what he's been working on, I'm going to post the link to his server in the general chat, and you guys can go ahead and join that as well.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions for Thorson? Anyone from the audience have a question for Thorson?
Yeah, so about just really quick, I posted that video I was referencing, the TED Talk, and then sorry, Kashika was asking. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So, Drew, do you have any final messages or any thoughts that you would like to leave us with?
Thorson, you mean?
Sorry, Thorson. Yes, Thorson. Sorry about that.
Hellboy just typed he has a question.
It's okay. I'm going to ask, we'll go back to Kashika's there. Do you have any final thoughts? Again, this was an excellent presentation. Love to have you on again in the future anytime you want more. But for now, do you have any final takeaways you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, whoever's interested, this is an incredible, huge passion project of mine. I've been doing this for 6 years. I've written 2 really long Reddit posts. I've created so many different videos, but because this topic is so massive and so big, and the connecting systems of how it all works, it is hard to parse it all. And a lot of my efforts have been somewhat inefficient. But I've created a lot of Google documents. I already have a framework for healthy conversations, drawing out diagrams, and I would love anyone that wants to jump on board and help with it and go through it all.
And just a last note, we have a hashtag member content channel, so please go ahead and post any of your work there for people to find and leave it in the archive. And feel free to post anything you do now or in the future right in the general chat so that more people will see it as well.
Great idea. Well, thank you, Thorson. Thank you. That was fantastic. Yeah, great.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry,
Thank you,
sometimes it's a
everyone.
little disjointed. Yeah.
Oh, no worries,
Sorry,
no worries at all. I was just going to thank everyone, the live audience, for participating, for being here, attending. We are the Round Table once again. As a reminder, you can find this and all of our amazing Round Table podcasts on BitChute, the 4 YouTube channels, and YouTube Live, right? So also join us on the Roundtable Discord server. You can just do a search online for Roundtable Discord. You'll find us under conspiracy theories or politics on Discord, where we record these podcasts. And everyone, thank you. Thank you, Rafi, for recording. Thank you, Shogun. Thank you, Thorson. That was fantastic.